Guys, Ninja the Body Whisperer here. I'm gonna do some stretches with you. So I just did my 12 minutes, and I don't necessarily record this stuff, but I tend to just kind of go for a period of time on each spot, kind of more of by feel, but let's say around 30 seconds whenever I'll give you just an example. So I have 3 balls of different sizes. This one's kind of knurled, it has these little bumps on it. Maybe the bumps are good, maybe they're not. It's just about the size though. So this one's it's bigger than a golf ball, but maybe not as big as a tennis ball. So maybe a little bit closer to a tennis ball. This is probably more like a tennis ball, but it's a really hard ball. And then this guy, I don't know what this would be, like a big softball, but it's soft as well. Like it's firm, but it's made out of like foam. So it's like a dense foam. So I'm gonna just start off. Actually, what I think I'm gonna do is just start off with hamstrings. So what I like to do is take the the tennis ball size one and put it under my hamstring, and then kind of do a hurdler stretch where I stretch into it, but I put the ball, so it's a pretty hard ball, underneath my hamstring. So I'm getting the hamstring stretch, but I'm also getting kind of a pressure point, because I do find that my hamstrings get really tight. You know, that could be genetic. It could be just because I'm still pretty flexible in them. So when I talk about this tightness, it's in a different way. It's almost knotted in a way. But what I also find is that even though, like, because I've always had pretty good flexibility in my hamstrings, but what I almost feel like is they get, I don't know how to describe it, like they're really strong, and then I almost feel like they might be an imbalanced strength. So whatever they're going against isn't quite as strong as them, so there becomes a bit of an imbalance, right? If that makes sense. So I just moved it again, and I'm continuing to stretch. If you take your heel off the floor, you get even more of an intense stretch into the spot. So I'm going to switch. See, now with this side, I have more of a, even though I'm stretching out my hamstring, I feel this kind of pull in this, what I think it might be is my, what do you call it, psoas muscle that kind of connects the lower body and the upper body. And I feel like I have a bit of a psoas issue on the left side. Move that. Again, I tend to go for just how it feels. And I'm picking my heel up on this, trying to dig a little bit more in there. So now that I've done that, I think I'm going to do a little bit of a kind of a straight out, basically a stretch. The other thing that I've noticed, and maybe it's not the hamstrings that are super tight, but we have insertions from the hip flexors, and one of the hip flexors kind of goes from the hips all the way down the femur in the front. And I would almost say that those I definitely, so when I do something like this, I definitely feel, they feel like really tight drums. And something I've tried is kind of rolling forward on this one ball to kind of do the same thing as what I did there, almost create a pressure point, because I can't quite get in there with my hands. But so I'm using my body weight and then the ball to kind of press. And if I can get forward a little more, kind of presses into there. Great. Do that on, kind of get it on there, and then rolling, kind of rolling up and on, but keeping it forward enough. I don't know if this is doing anything. Just trying it. So when I do this stuff, I tend to just try and find the spots that are tight, that I notice throughout the day, and I do notice them. And I try and get into them. So I'm gonna use the bigger ball and get up and on there with my glute, because I do notice that, and it's hard to describe exactly where it is in the glutes. It's kind of the whole thing. Again, I'm not exactly sure where the tightness from this comes from. It could be genetic, it could be a former injury, it could be not training properly and then it just becoming like a bit off kilter, or maybe overtraining and coming too strong. I don't know the reason why. Again, I spoke about this yesterday about asking the question why, and I think you need to a certain extent, but then you'll get to a place where you realize the answer isn't in the why, unless the why doesn't allow you to take action, if that makes sense. If you're not taking action and you consistently don't take action in some way, shape, or form, then maybe the why is holding you back, and then the action you might need to take is to find somebody to help you kind of like I had spoken yesterday, kind of clearing out that clutter so that you're able to get past the why and then start taking action. And that's really where it's at. If you can't take action, if you don't consistently take action in a realm, like for some reason I take action in this realm, right? I'll tell you where a place I don't take action in is, in a lot of ways, and people might be surprised about this, I don't take a lot of action in my career. I'm not exactly sure why. I'm trying to change that. I am trying to change that, and utilizing things that I've learned in other aspects to kind of just say, keep taking action. So, and like I said yesterday, the way that I've learned, even with my diet or exercise, is that I make myself goals, or I make myself accountable to myself, or I make a game out of it, or make it into, well, let's see what if I just do this 30 days, right? So, it would make sense that then that's what I would need to do for anything else, because it's all kind of the same. That's what I've kind of discovered, is it's all kind of the same. So rather than asking, well, why is it that you don't market yourself? Why is it that you don't? I don't. I'm sure I could come up with reasons, and I could probably look back on things, and I'm sure that there's certain like things that I've kind of developed in my head, or fears or whatever. But rather than looking at the why, figuring out how to hack it, trick it. And now that I'm speaking this out loud, maybe that's part of it. Maybe this is a good thing to discuss, is that because in the past I couldn't handle closed loop, or as a friend described, it's like long-term closed hierarchies. And that's, that was discovering a why. I couldn't handle long-term closed hierarchies because I had never developed the skills to truly be in long-term hierarchy, because I was afraid of long-term hierarchies, mostly because of family dynamics. I don't have to necessarily get into that, but we all have our things, and I developed my thing because of probably just from my birth personality, how I was born. I started looking at the world in a certain way, and it seemed very confusing to me. And I would say not until the last couple of years have I really figured, like, I could pretend enough to play nice, in the sense, or at least pretend enough to kind of be in there, but then I just wasn't capable of staying in, which didn't do me any favors, and also I always had to keep on the go. So now I'm trying to put myself in a situation where I have to stay in one place, which is scary to me. We don't have to talk about why it's scary. Who cares? It's just like, admit, okay, that's it's weird to me. It's less weird to me now, so I'm capable of at least seeing it and going like, no, if I want my, maybe my if we're talking about my like career to maybe be different than it is, which I'm grateful for all the things that I have had an opportunity to do, but I think I'm ready for that next step. Because I feel more like I could stay, because I know how to set boundaries. I know how to be in relationships with people, or at least I'm getting better, and want to be in relationships with people, whereas in the past I used to avoid them. Again, why? I don't know, who cares? I mean, I do know, but that's not about getting into that. But then it's like, what do you do to take steps to move and take the action to keep moving forward? But you're not going to move forward into something, and this is something I talked to my sister again about, was even with this 12 minutes, like her brain wasn't ready, and then the other day she just sat down and made a schedule, and then she was like, oh, I get it, I can stick it into these places. But until she made that schedule for herself, she wasn't ready. So you're not going to be ready until you're ready, and it does you no good to worry about it, but that's what we do. So we know we're not ready, and then we worry about it, and then we just tie ourselves into knots. So if I take that advice from myself in this one area that I seem to have most of my life been focused on, so if I just take that same concept, which is just showing up, doing a little bit every day, rather than trying to take big chunks and say, what little thing can I do today for my career, rather than thinking like, oh, I've got to do it all today, all tomorrow, so that maybe 10 years down the road, when I'm 51, I will be in the place that kind of that's in my head, right? So it's like trusting it, trusting the process, like I've spoken about. So developing a process for that, and maybe part of that is talking to you about this right here during this stretch. So now I'm going to do big ball in the back. This one's always surprising for me. Oh gosh. I feel like if I could just push a button and say, relax. There's some deep muscles in here, and lots of different layers and different protections that have happened over the years. Probably from Now, if you want to talk about why, I mean, there's so many things, traumas, from like physical traumas, football, contact sports, you know, learned behavior of not, you know, we constantly are learning to not truly breathe. People don't breathe deeply, and that's just kind of a learned behavior culturally. Because if you breathe deeply, you might actually feel something. But there's a lot of things, you know, different injuries, and then the overcompensation of different body parts to try and, it's all connected, so it's all trying to help you just survive. And that's really what it's about. All the things that I'm telling you about, that, you know, these issues of you know, maybe how I would go about being a bit of a ghost in relationships, was because that's what I learned to do to survive. And it worked, because I'm still here. So, but then what I've found is the strength that you have from that will at some point outlive its usefulness, if that makes sense. So you'll get to a point where you don't need it, because you don't need to protect yourself, and maybe at some age you did, and then that's how you survive. But then it'll get to a point where it basically holds you back from your potential, and you know, that self-awareness and seeing it for what it is, and then not necessarily asking the why, unless it's really blocking you up, which probably will to a certain extent. But once you start, you know, being observant of yourself, taking action and moving forward, you can really make some progress in that. And you know, a lot of it has to do with, you know, 4 things. If you're looking at your life, and if you feel fear, resentment, if you're constantly self-seeking, like if you are aware of this, which most people are, your fear makes you self-centered, because you're afraid that there's never going to be enough, so you're always looking out for numero uno. So if you're fearful, if you're self-seeking, which is looking out for numero uno, and you're doing things and manipulating situations so that you get what you want, it's going to step on people's toes. And then if you're dishonest, which the crazy thing about dishonesty is that it can become such a you know, it can be like breathing for people. There's a great line in Infinity War, and he goes, Thanos is saying to the Collector, it's like, why would I lie? And he's like, I don't know, I imagine that it's a bit like breathing for you. Breathing is, you know, you don't consciously breathe, right? I mean, you don't need to. We do at times, we hold our breath, maybe consciously you can hold your breath, but typically your heartbeat, your breath, it's sympathetic, whereas it just happens, right? You're not gonna not breathe unless you're dead. So it can be like a subconscious thing. So that's my stretching, that's my rolling out. I ended up not using the small ball, even though that one does, that can really, you know, it's a different kind of getting in there. Lately I've been enjoying the larger ball, but now, you know, now that I'm feeling this, it might be kind of nice to switch up and do a little bit of both, because they do kind of hit in a little different way, right? Like this one, I can actually get into kind of my side, that kind of this, you know, you have that muscle kind of on your hip. The one that in like, I don't know, it's like, it's kind of a side thigh muscle. That one I noticed that sometimes I'll get in, like, if you kind of put your hand, like if I put my hand in between my jeans and there, and you kind of almost use your jean material, and then you can press kind of like on the inside, but then you're using the jean material to give you some kind of like pushback. You can get some really nice trigger point going. see what time it is. Okay. I gotta get ready for some stuff. Meet a friend at 3:30. Gotta write an email. So thanks for sharing time with me on stretch. Get some softballs, different things, play around, find what works for you. Nothing. You can also use a foam roller. I know foam rollers for me just don't do it. I know a lot of people who do. So keep moving, people. Binge out.